I just found out my HIV test was a false positive. What's the best news you've ever gotten? My story is similar. I'm a pathologist, and I once gave myself a nasty cut while performing an autopsy. Turned out the dude was HIV positive. I was on pins and needles for a while, but everything turned out okay. Well, for me, anyway. That guy was still dead. Upvote for most relevant username ever. I was once told I had leukemia and to put my affairs in order. 2 weeks later they apologized and said the test results had been switched at the lab. Worst 2 weeks ever. Got to feel a little bad for the other person here. After 3 separate blood tests, we confirmed that the unknown mass in my side was not ovarian cancer, but just a simple ovarian cyst. 10 minutes after Tower 1 collapsed, we got phone call from my mom telling us that her and all of her co-workers had made it down from the 56th floor and would be coming home. After Tower 1 collapsed, my aunt called and told us she had stayed home from work that day to study for a certification test. My younger brother's best friend was in a plane crash. Kid wasn't even in high school. I've never seen him so distraught in his life. He didn't know where he was. Then he found out his friend was one of the survivors. Huge relief for the entire family. My mom got into a head-on collision on the freeway. The only thing I knew for a few hours was that she was in a head-on collision on the freeway and they were flying her to the hospital. I just assumed that she was either dead, dying, or badly injured. I didn't think there really was any other option. Having a head-on collision on the freeway is something that you don't just walk away from. They closed down the section of the freeway where it occurred, so we had to wait 3 hours in the traffic caused by the accident. We found out later that a young girl in the other car was killed. A guy driving behind her had his legs crushed and I still don't know if he survived. I got to the hospital to find that she was fine. She was knocked out by the crash, had a bit of whiplash, and a small cut on her forehead that they sutured up. She was extremely lucky that she wasn't killed. They had to use the jaws of life to get her out and part of the car's frame was about an inch away from her throat. Oh wow, that is terrifying. I'm so glad she was okay. Poor other people though. Last year both my parents lost their jobs and got a little bit depressed. Couple of weeks ago my mom found out she'd been hired for a new job and my dad got a check for all the wages he was owed when his company closed down. First of all, big congrats on your sobriety and your not having HIV. My best news, your sister was in a bad car crash. She's okay. The sudden realization that within my lifetime, HIV has gone from being a death sentence to a crappy yet manageable chronic disease. Unfortunately my uncle died of AIDS in '99. I wish it had happened just a little sooner. This is going to sound really odd, but the best news I have ever gotten was a rejection letter. I made decent grades all throughout high school. I didn't have a 4.0, but was doing rather well for myself. I applied to one of the best schools in the country that was also relatively close to my hometown. Everyone thought I was going to get in. At first I wanted to, but the pressure of what being accepted meant started to freak me out. I deal with stress in less than healthy ways and I let my anxiety get to me. I knew getting into that school would mean hours upon hours of work and very little social time. My friends are the only thing that keep me from dealing with stress poorly. The tuition rates were also way out of my price range. My mother promised we would make it work somehow, but I knew I would be in huge debt for just my undergraduate degree. My major requires at least a master's. When that letter came I was so afraid of getting in, but I didn't. I was so relieved. My parents and teachers thought I was robbed and did their best to comfort me, but I didn't care. I now attend a state college, but a damn good one, and couldn't be any prouder of myself. I am able to make ends meet and don't have any debt, and have time for myself and my friends. I can't express how much I love this post. The day my prospective marriage visa was officially approved by the Australian Department of Immigration was the best day of my life. The day she told me she couldn't go through with it was the worst. Spoiler. The wife had a positive pregnancy test about a week after one of the best fertility doctors in the country told us she wouldn't be able to be pregnant. That little crap will be 4 weeks old tomorrow and she's perfectly healthy. When I read the wife had a positive pregnancy test I thought the good news was going to be that it turned out she wasn't pregnant after all, because I've been in that boat. When I used to smoke, I coughed up blood once. Thought it was cancer, so went to the doctors to check it out. Got an x-ray done, blood test done. Turned out I didn't have lung cancer. I actually damaged my throat for overexerting my voice at my telemarketing job. So after that I went home and had a victory fap. Being told I didn't have breast cancer. I was 19 and scared to death after being told by another doctor that I most likely had some form of it, and it felt amazing to be told the other doctor was wrong. My dad's doctors thought that his brain tumor was a secondary tumor that originated somewhere else, so they told us that his cancer had already metastasized. After every scan imaginable to find the original tumor and additional lab work, it turns out there was no original tumor, and that after the brain tumor was removed, my dad was completely cancer free. Surgery was in January, and he is very much alive and well. Matter of fact, he ran his best 5K ever a few weeks ago. TLDR. Doctors said my dad had cancer that had metastasized. Doctors were wrong. Dad is very alive, very well, and cancer free. So far, the best news I've gotten is that, despite having a condition that often destroys fertility, it was diagnosed during surgery and the surgeon told me I could manage it with medications and prevent it from spreading. I found out that I can still have children. Not everyone wants them, but I do, so I was happy. And if I hadn't had the diagnosis, I might never have been able to have them later when I wanted them. X was late by about a week or so. We'd been pretty careful, but not as careful as we could have been. She took a test and it came back positive. I had a bit of a freak out. We got another test and confirmed that it was negative. Showed me how ready I wasn't for children. When I was 13, the veins in my father's esophagus ruptured, causing severe internal bleeding. He drove himself to the hospital where I was told he fainted in the urgent care waiting room and was then immediately taken to the OR for diagnosis and treatment. When I found this out, I was playing my Pokemon game in the living room and mom came in to tell me dad is in the hospital and it didn't look good. I was taken to the hospital to visit my dad, but I now know I was seeing him to essentially say goodbye because the hospital didn't think he was going to make it through the night. He was hooked up to machines and he was so white. I broke down and started crying. I grabbed onto my dad and would not let go for the next 2 weeks. I sat there in a chair next to him and held his hand whenever I could in between blood transfusions and different tests. I missed school and was told I couldn't stay, but I fought hard and would not leave my dad's side because I knew it could be my last day with him anytime now. 3 days before the end of the 2 weeks, I was sleeping with my head on his lap and the doctor came in and woke me up. He looked at me and told me that the procedure they had performed on him earlier had worked and that my dad should be able to make it. I remember shaking and crying violently, successively waking my dad up from his drug-induced slumber. 3 days later, I pushed my dad in a wheelchair out from the hospital back to our house. The best news I have ever gotten is that my dad will live. I still can't go into a hospital without having horrible sick feelings. OHH. I think reading this story got something in my eye. That's so weird. Sniffle. When I found out my abusive ex-boyfriend was found guilty on domestic violence and rape charges, the success of the latter charge was really up in the air until the end. I feel a little bad for my best news being someone else's worst news, but whatever. No pity for rapists. Revel in it. That a horrible disease I have has had successful treatments, meaning a cure is a very real possibility. It wouldn't affect me in my lifetime, but the hope that future generations wouldn't have to suffer is just fantastic. This disease is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Has had. I love it. My wife does planning for labs and procedures. Usually positives are done more than once. They plan on eliminating false negatives, so they are on the side of caution. Keeping that in mind, I had blood work done and I got a call in for a second battery. The nurse said that I had indications of HEP. I flipped out. When I got to the doctors, he said that the nurse should have never said that because the blood work was still going through secondary testing at the lab still. I didn't have HEP. It's not the right procedure to notify someone until they've gone through at least 3 tests if positive. There's different dilution strengths, and then different machines to test. Each one is a different procedure to narrow things down. These are huge labs she helped write procedures for and now does the planning for purchases and lab design, meeting guidelines. Stuff that's beyond me. The point is that whoever said you were HIV positive shouldn't have said that yet. Your test, among thousands of others, could have been the result of contamination, vibration, someone not wiping their hands right whilst refilling reagents, humidity issues. So many factors are in place with those big freaking machines that cost millions of dollars that can process thousands of samples in a day or two. A pippetter could have been knocking tubes around. Anything. When a lab comes up with a positive, that original sample is redone and redone. If there's not enough, a formal request for another sample is done. And that's pretty much all you should be told. That it was inconclusive. The doc opened the door for a big acid lawsuit if you would have driven your car off of a bridge and left your family loved ones who relied upon your income. Well, you get the idea. If you offed yourself, your family could have sued for your income for life pre-tax into a trust fund at least. It's happened. I bet the supervisor of that shift is in some serious hot water right now. If not the senior manager, definitely the lab worker, unless she followed the step-ups procedures fully and has everything documented. If not, that person probably is fired. Lab guidelines, under FDA stuff, mean they can't blame the machine because there's supposed to be two. And then other procedures post-flagging in case of a positive. If they blame the machine, then the lab is shut down until the machines are serviced, tested, then recertified by a licensed FDA, or is it CDC? I forget. Person. And that's about 2 weeks of downtime. You may take some comfort in that their haste and your angst. While that happened, some serious issues internally happened and are most likely happening at that lab, and people have to work overtime now. Your life is pretty important. More important than the cost of those machines, millions, and man hours. At 11 weeks pregnant, right before they do all the major testing to make sure the fetus is normal and okay, I was diagnosed with TTP. Treated throughout the pregnancy, nearly died twice, had 63 plasmapheresis treatments, multiple blood transfusions, and at 7 months go septicemia from an infect port to my heart, which led to a fantastic IQ trip with near acute respiratory failure due to pneumonia. Obviously freaking that with everything I had to endure and no way to tell during the 3-month mark. Tests would come back skewed since my blood is the issue. I thought my daughter was going to have 3 arms or something. Finally, when I was around 5 months and freed from the hospital, for the first time, spent time after in and out or in outpatient, I go in for the perinatologist, high risk baby doc, expecting the worst, only to find out that she's perfectly normal. I remember the exact words too well. If we took you out of the picture, this would be a perfect pregnancy. She's fine. Did the happy dance of oh thank Bob and nearly ripped out a suture on my chest port. Little brat will be 1 on the 22nd of June and is absolutely perfect, beautiful, and brilliant. I'm biased. Frick off. She's also an only child, and will stay that way. Oh, and I've officially been in remission for 8 months now, so yay. Amazing. The best news was when I was in the hospital just recently, and I hadn't urinated for over a week due to end-stage kidney failure. Well, one lucky night, I felt a special tickle that I hadn't felt in a long time. That night I peed brown pee, which burned like heck, but the doctors told me the news that this meant my kidneys were once again functioning and I wouldn't need dialysis any longer. I had rhabdomyolysis, which is something you'd probably see on the show House. It's really rare, but the only remaining symptom from the traumatic 1.5-month hospital stay is some nerve damage in my leg and foot. I once got an email from some group that sends anonymous messages for you if you need to contact people you've slept with to tell them they should get tested. I was on Skype at the time with my good friend. My email goes bling and I see what the message is, which is some attempt at adding humor to the situation. It said something like, "Hey, you know what isn't fun? Herpes. You should get tested." Personal message. From 4 Fingers. The from 4 Fingers is a reference to the fact that 4 fingers were the amount it took to get this girl going. I'm not proud. Anyway, while on Skype, I freaked out, then tried to get a hold of anyone that would have sent this to me and wasn't able to. The crazy thing is, a few days prior I got a random call from an unknown number. I answered, and at the time I didn't think about it, but some random older couple answered and I was like, who is this? And I heard them say, it must be one of S friends. I didn't even make the connection because it was a one night stand, but it was the same name of 4 Fingers. So, Freaking out, I downed 4 cups of coffee and smoked 6 cigarettes as I drove to the clinic. As I was pulling into the parking lot, my phone rings. I park the car and get out, and it's my friend who I called earlier. "Hey man, what's up? You called me," he says. "Yeah, I did. Did you play a joke on me?" Haha, "Yeah, I did." He's in med school, and it unwound that he was learning about STDs in his class that day, and the professor told them about the free online service to tell people to get tested. He thought it would be fun to send me a message, but because of that dang phone call with the random people who answered, I flipped out. Frick it. TLDR. My friend sent me an anonymous email that I should get tested for herpes. Maybe I still should. That's great, man. Congrats. Mine is when a close family member had a medical emergency that put them in a coma for an extended period of time, and finding out that they were going to survive, against very extreme odds. They are making an Avengers movie in a couple of years. It was the best news I ever got, even if my penis exploded from excitement. Good on you for being clean from coke and heroin for 3.5 months. That must have been really hard and painful. Well done, Squeakbot. About 2 years ago, my husband lost his job, and it wasn't like a normal thing with severance and unemployment benefits. He had been a contract programmer with a company in another state. They simply stopped paying him and started making excuses. Then they went quiet and we were left with no way to collect what was owed. I had a couple part-time jobs, but it wasn't enough. We had to start dipping into the money we'd put away for the kids' college. Several months passed, we were falling further and further behind, and the savings were almost gone. And finally, just after we had used the last of our savings to pay one last month's rent, he was hired by the local university. We are still struggling to get back on top of things, and our kids are going to have to rely on grants and loans now, but at least we avoided being homeless. When my mom's surgery was moved up 2 weeks, another person volunteered to switch dates with my mom. My mom was on her deathbed and a stranger sacrificed their surgery, and possibly their life, so that she could have her surgery sooner. My mom died 18 months later, but she would have had at most a month if her surgery had happened when it was first scheduled. We don't know who sacrificed their surgery, but whoever they are, they gave us 18 more months with our mom. I called home and my grandma told me my mom was in the hospital with a broken neck, but grandma is pretty ancient and a bit rocky. She really had no details and no idea how mom was doing at all. I couldn't get a hold of anyone who knew she was okay for an entire day. Then mom calls me. She had forgotten her phone was on silent. She was fine. Barely fractured a vertebrae that didn't do anything but make her wear an uncomfortable brace for a month. My mom is my best friend, my hero, my role model, my everything. I was 18 at the time and had just moved out of the house. I needed her. She was my Dumbledore and I had just gotten my wand. I spent 24 hours convinced she was dead. New college grad with about the most useless major possible. 2.4 GPA. Dong all experience. No powerful relatives friends. Half of my classmates are out on unpaid internships and the other half are unemployed. And I start a $40K year job this week with a Fortune 500 company. I have taken the liberty of making a throwaway, the name in reference to the downvotes I expect to receive, so as to save the little karma I have managed to collect. Dang, man, you really lucked out. Congrats. That being said, start being wise with your money now, if you haven't already been. Budget, save, work on getting rid of student debts, etc. And as for the job, don't frick it up. Your doctor actually left the result in a voicemail? I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to do that since other people can listen to your messages and accidentally get private information. Finding out that my brother-in-law wrecked his bike by hitting a deer at around 75 mph from him. His bike was totaled, the deer and its fetus were destroyed, and he was riding alone at night. When he woke up, he called his wife to tell the insurance, called an ambulance, and called us. Some bruising, several stitches, and a completely rebuilt bike later, he is fine. When my sister-in-law told the insurance guy, he said that it was the first time he had ever heard of someone living through that. I was lying in a hospital bed completely paralyzed and on a respirator last July. The first spinal tap they administered came back and said I was negative for Guillain-Barré syndrome. The 3 possibilities they gave me were polio, meningitis, or GBS. I was terrified of being crippled forever or being an amputee. A few days later I was told that a mistake was made and that I actually do have GBS and would fully recover eventually. It's been a long road, but I'm optimistic and know it could have been worse. The best day for me was when my wife said I do. That was over 24 years ago. We have had our good times and a lot of bad times, but she has stayed with me through them all. I couldn't afford to give her what she wanted most of the time. All I can afford is my love. Maybe one day I can give her more. Remember, everybody, don't give up on love. It does exist. I am proof. I accidentally left my backpack with my laptop and iPod inside under a bar stool at happy hour about 2 weeks before finals. I'm in grad school and we take our finals on our laptops. And we study by reading over all of our notes which we type all semester long on our laptops. I realized this about an hour after we'd left the bar. It was still daytime, and the bar this was at is a pretty clean bar frequented by upper middle class white collar types and other grad students. We are nowhere near the undergrads. So I was pretty sure the laptop would still be there, although I booked it over there as soon as I realized I left it there. Suddenly the bar was quite a bit busier than it had been an hour earlier. And my backpack was not where I'd left it. I immediately asked the bartenders, the same ones that were working there an hour earlier that had served me, if anyone had turned in a backpack. They hadn't seen it. I checked on campus, right across the street, to see if anyone had turned it into our lost and found. Nope. So I was thoroughly shaken by this point, as all of my notes were gone, all of my music was gone, finals were in 2 weeks, and I could not at all afford a new laptop. So I'd have to handwrite my crappy exams that I could hardly study for. I filed a detailed police report online with the serial number but didn't hold my hopes up. Borrowed a roommate's laptop for that. The next day, I was headed to school to check for my laptop again at the same bar, just in case. Before I got there, I got a voicemail from one of my roommates, who had just gone to that bar with his friends for a beer break at lunch and said my backpack was behind the bar. Everything was inside. I've never been more relieved. Apparently, when I looked for the backpack the day before, somebody must have moved it off to the side somewhere so they could use the bar stool I was at, but didn't hand it over the counter. Apparently the cleaning crew found it on the floor the next morning. TL. DR. Grad student. Left backpack with laptop and iPod inside at bar 2 weeks before finals. Couldn't find it anywhere when I looked. Thought it was stolen and all my notes were gone. Roommate found it at the bar the next day. My wife and I had been trying to have a baby for a year, and, after both getting tested, we found out that while I had an above average sperm count, I had a high percentage of sperm with bent tails. The most likely effect was that my guys weren't able to get where they needed to go because they weren't straight swimmers. After a couple of weeks, we found out that the same day we received this news via a letter from our fertility specialist. We conceived. Fast forward a month, and my wife's doctor was doing the first ultrasound. After getting her bearings on the screen, she let out a confused sounding "huh." My heart sank because I thought something was wrong or the baby wasn't alive. We both asked, "What's wrong?" She started smiling and looked back at me and said, "There's two. From worst news ever to best news ever in 3 seconds. This will probably get buried, but I have to chip in with mine. When I was told that my cancer was gone and I didn't have to do any more treatment. Best news ever. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 15. I went through 8 months of chemotherapy, and my schedule was set back twice due to low white blood cell count. I even had chemotherapy on my sweet 16th. I also went through 5 surgeries, including an emergency surgery to remove an infected portacath that could have killed me. After my chemotherapy was done, I went in for another PET and CT scan, and a few days after that went to my oncologist to hear my results. I was expecting to hear, "All good, go home and cancer no more." Instead, I got told by a very sad doctor that they still found cancer, and that I would need 2 months of daily radiation. We cried together, and then we started making plans. By that time, I was stuck in a wheelchair. All my hair had fallen out, even my eyelashes. I had loads of mouth sores and felt awful all the time. The steroids that I was taking to help increase my white count were making me bulk up big time. I was a 16-year-old girl who was constantly mistaken for a boy. I did the 2 months of daily radiation, including treatment on Thanksgiving Day, and went in for another battery of scans. My oncologist this time told me not to get my hopes up, that there were a lot of possibilities, but not to worry because whatever happened, we could work through it with more aggressive chemotherapy. I went in to meet with her, but she wasn't there that day. Instead, I met with another oncologist on my team, just not my primary. As soon as I walked in the door, I knew it was bad news. And, indeed, it was. She sat me down and told me there were still suspicious looking spots on my scans and it looked like the cancer wasn't gone yet. We planned to come back and work out a new chemo regimen with my regular oncologist the next day. My mother told me later that day, watching me cry in my wheelchair as she wheeled me back to the car, was the moment she felt for sure that she was going to lose me. We went back to the hospital the next day. My regular doctor was there, and she said she had exciting news. The other oncologist had assembled my team to go over my results and it was the consensus of everyone that the shadows were just some residual scarring left over from my radiation. It would fade in time, and, importantly, the cancer was gone. I was declared cancer-free that day, still with the caveat that relapse was possible and a regular checkup plan, and I went home the happiest girl in America. I am now 8 years out and never relapsed. Of all the wonderful news I've been given in my life, that, without a doubt, takes the cake. TLDR. The day they told me that, after nearly a year's awful struggle with cancer rife with setbacks, I was cancer-free. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.